Wallopin Websnappers.
Stan Lee and Steve Ditko introduced the world to Peter Parker in 1962. In 1967, he was given a voice.
Ouch, something bit me. It was just a spider. Why do I feel so strange, so different? What's come over me? I'm scaling this wall just as easily as I can walk. I might as well call myself Spider-Man. Okay, world, better hang on to your hat. You're about to meet the original web-swinging wonder.
Hello, this is Paul Soles, the original voice of your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Let me introduce you to the men and women who first portrayed in sound the enduring characters from Marvel's The Amazing Spider-Man. Why were the tracks recorded in Toronto with Canadian actors? Stay tuned. From its inception in the 1930s, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation has nurtured an extraordinary radio acting community. One of its principal admirers was Orson Welles, at a time when radio storytelling was still and often the only primetime family entertainment. Most of these shows originated in Canada's largest English-speaking city, Toronto. Searching for a pool of talented performers readily available and prepared to work for reasonable rates, New York producers found a veteran CBC announcer-producer in Bernard Cowan. Thus began a relationship that built an industry. It began in the late 50s. It flourished for 20 years. Pinocchio, Wizard of Oz, and Return to Oz were early productions. Later, there were others like the Marvel superheroes, Rocket Robin Hood, Professor Kitzel, The Spirit of 76. But it was the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer TV special in 1964 that put the Toronto industry on the map. NBC producers Arthur Rankin Jr. and Jules Bass mounted a full-scale presentation of the Rudolph legend that has enchanted families now for 40 Christmases.
Since I played Hermie, the misfit elf who wanted to be a dentist.
Well, I'll tell you more about that show later. In 1967, ABC, through Steve Krantz, contracted Grant Trade Lawrence Animation to produce the Spider-Man cartoon project. By this time, Cowan had recruited a sizable stable of versatile voice professionals, and from his roster he chose Paul Kligman, Peg Dixon, and myself as the principals and offered the major villain roles to others. Join me now and meet the cast of the Spider-Man cartoon. Paul Kligman was the obvious choice for J. Jonah, and Peg was the perfect secretary. So what was it that inclined Cowan to give me the nod to play Peter Parker? I can only conclude that he intuitively understood that we had a lot in common. Like Peter, I was no big man on campus, not especially successful with the girls, and throughout my career I've occasionally encountered certain bosses who sometimes seemed unreasonable. So playing Peter was easy. But interpreting his alter ego was a challenge. I'd never thought of myself as a superhero, never suffered the loss of a close family member, let alone bearing responsibility for their fate. But as in the comic book, once I sort of let myself put on the mask, my confidence rose and my voice naturally deepened as Spidey wrestled the villains with verve and flair and fun. And fun it was. Look, this was a cartoon, not Shakespeare. The stories and the action allowed us, licensed us to be kids again and play. So picture the studio, grown men and women with no pictures or music to get in the way, just to worry about making paper noise with our scripts, letting the words lead our bodies to perform flips and twists and contortions, falling down and so on, playing villains on one side of the microphone and Spidey on the other. I've been lucky enough to perform on radio, television, stage, and screen. But if I had to choose, I'd say that voice work is my favorite. Everyone called him Bunny. Bernard Cowan defined a noble breed of radio craftsmen known as far back as the 20s as announcers. They got your attention, they held it, they informed and led you through the program. Bunny did that and much more in a career that lasted over 40 years. He was co-creator of one of Canada's first national jazz radio programs, the 1010 Swing Club, and host of the Toronto Symphony Pops concerts. He was a formidable presence in his profession, not only as a memorable voice, but as a director, producer, mentor, and pioneer in the formation of the Canadian Broadcasters Union, ACTRA. Through his tireless efforts and the efforts of others, Canadian performers, as well as those around the world, receive protections and benefits they otherwise would not have. One such benefit is residuals. Bunny drafted the first commercial residual agreement in North America. He was later honored by the union when they established the Bernard Cowan Medallion for significant contributions to ACTRA. He was also the recipient of the prestigious John Draney Award for outstanding contributions to broadcasting. As the man who produced the voice tracks for Spider-Man and so many other TV cartoons, he was unmatched for remarkable tact and leadership. You can hear him as nearly every cop, warden, sometimes villain, narrator, and what have you in the cartoon. Throughout his life, he befriended, counseled, and supported fledgling and veteran performers and demanded the highest standards for himself most of all. To the actor, he was a wise and gentle friend. If ever a man was born to a part, Paul Kligman was built to be J. Jonah Jameson. A hearty bull of a man in build and countenance, he was in real life gregarious, genial, and often gentle. The comedy team of Wayne and Schuster hold the record for the most appearances on The Ed Sullivan Show, and as the dependable second banana to Frank and Johnny, Paul had a role in all of their sketches. As a teenager in Winnipeg, he won the first of his many theatrical roles in The Man Who Came to Dinner. He appeared on stages across Canada, and it was in Edmonton that he achieved remarkable success playing Othello. The production was noteworthy for being the last show reviewed by Nathan Cohen, the renowned Canadian theater critic who undertook the assignment to fulfill a promise he'd made to Paul. Happily, it was a laudatory review. While one side of Kligman's personality showed as the bombastic publisher of the Daily Bugle and gruff reindeer coach Comet in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, he also had great humanity. That quality shone in a reflective and moving biography of his father titled It All Ends Up in a Shopping Bag, published in 1975. She was a tall, stunning brunette with a saucy disposition that was instantly endearing, just like Betty Brant. And she was the quintessential long-suffering secretary to old J.J.J., friend and would-be romantic interest of Peter Parker, and supporter of Spider-Man. Peg was noteworthy for supplying nearly every female voice in the series. And because she was so versatile, Peg was regularly called for network radio drama and commercial voiceovers. She was also married to Ed McNamara, who played Rhino, one of Spidey's several sinister villains. She now lives in Victoria, British Columbia, and returned to using her original given name, Melissa. Wrapped in the beauty of the Pacific Coast, she's been inspired to practice and excel in her first love, which was writing. But not just any writing. She mastered the Japanese poetic form known as hanka, a much more demanding art than haiku. To fight the good fight and win only means something if your opponent is a worthy one. And man, did we have an assortment of the best and strangest of villains. Some were fantastic, some downright sinister, some bore grudges, some were laughable, but all were highly original. All presented Peter with a challenge that he needed all his wiles to meet. We had a wonderfully inventive cast of actors whose voices dripped with dastardly danger. Ed McNamara had a rugged outdoorsman quality, which is very much in evidence in his portrayal of the raging Rhino. Chris Wiggins was as arch and menacing on the street as he was in the studio. You might remember him as the patriarch of TV's Swiss Family Robinson. Chris was the malevolent Mysterio and the Australian hunter Ali Clivenden. Len Carlson, truly a child in a grown-up's body. In the cartoon realm, he found his perfect playground. He breathed ghoulish life into the Green Goblin and also voiced the pernicious Parafino. Tom Harvey, in real life, is wonderfully sardonic with a true comic bent. You saw him in John Byner's Bizarre and heard him as the elusive Electro and the slithering Sandman. Henry Raymer possesses arguably Canada's finest commercial voice. Stern, erudite, and full of authority, you heard him as the diabolical Dr. Noah Boddy and robot inventor Henry Smythe. Carl Banas. Well, all of Carl's colleagues would unanimously tell you he was the nicest guy they knew. Carl hosted an easy-listening radio show in Toronto for many years, and you heard traces of that in his cloying Charles cameo, but he curdled your blood as Scorpion. Gilly Fennick, always perfectly terrifying and perfectly English. The diminutive Fennick portrayed Dr. Curtis Connor, a.k.a. the Lizard, as well as the distinguished Dr. Smarter. Max Ferguson was Canada's original satirical radio morning man who had and played a collection of unbelievably off-the-wall records. Fresh from portraying Dr. Bruce Banner in the Hulk cartoon, Max was a fearsome Fifth Avenue phantom. Alfie Scop is as whimsical and gangly as the Clarabelle he created for Canada's Howdy Doody. Alfie was one of the plucky Patterson twins, and everywhere as other conspirators, college kids, and gangsters.
How does he do that?
The game is won.
Don't you know the natural prey of a scorpion is? A spider?
It's uncanny. Wallopin Websnappers.
Three years before we met to begin working on Spider-Man, some of us had already bonded as actors and friends on a project that became unexpected history. In 1964, stop-motion animation gave colorful life to Robert L. May's endearing story of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Of the 12 principal actors in the Rudolph Company, 9 would return to voice the Spider-Man cartoon. Paul Kligman was Rudolph's demanding father, Donner; Carl Banas, the overbearing foreman of elves; Alfie Skopp, the sad Charlie in the box; Peg Dixon, the devoted Mrs. Claus; myself as the earnest Hermie, who sings 2 enchanting songs with his fellow misfit Rudolph; and Bernard Cowan, Clarice's disciplinarian father. He was also the dialogue supervisor for the program. Now for the woman who played Rudolph. That's right, a woman. Throughout her long career, Billie Mae Richards has always been the one to call when a little boy's voice is required. Though she stands only 4 feet 10, Billie has become hugely famous for her charming portrayal of Rudolph. And she is still amazed that something that took only 2 days to produce in the studio has endured for 40 years. That she's earned praise from her children and grandchildren is a source of great pride. That the program has become a wholesome classic, ranking alongside others like A Christmas Carol and It's a Wonderful Life as enduring Yuletide family entertainment, is immensely satisfying to her.